Hey everyone, welcome to our video on price ceilings. So we'll start with the definition. Price ceilings are a government imposed maximum price for which a good or service can be sold. So if we start with a regular demand and supply diagram at equilibrium, we have to think, how do we draw a price ceiling on this, a maximum price? So when we think of ceilings, we think of a roof, like up high, right? So a lot of people want to draw it like this, price ceiling. But let's think, that will not do anything. So that's not going to change anyone's behavior because that's not stopping price and quantity reaching an equilibrium there. So therefore it has to go below. So it's got to go there. Here it's actually being a maximum price. So if you set a maximum price above equilibrium, no one cares. If you set a maximum price below equilibrium, it actually changes things. So here it decreases price and it decreases the quantity sold as well. Because look, we've got two quantities here. We've got the quantity demanded, that's increased, law of demand, right? And quantity supplied, that has decreased. Again, the law of supply. So the quantity supplied is the important one here because that's how much will actually get produced. So the quantity produced will fall. People can demand all they want. They're not going to get it because there is a price ceiling in place. Okay, we're going to look at some consequences of it. So I've got a picture here of Friends, like from the TV show. They lived in a rent-controlled apartment, which means there was a price ceiling. The rent could not get too high. That's the only way that these people could afford it. Rent in New York City, really expensive. So what are some consequences of these? So rent controls in New York are a well-known example of a price ceiling. So let's see what happens. We can get effects such as low quality goods. Let's look at it from the landlord's perspective. They're getting forced to charge rent below what the market would allow, right? So they're getting forced to make less money than they otherwise would. Why would they want to fix up their apartments? Why would they want to make them nicer if they can't get more rent for them? They wouldn't. So this is why what we get is low quality goods. That's an outcome that we're going to get here. Also, we're going to get underground or parallel markets. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this term. You might be familiar with the term black markets. It's like an illegal market, right? So this is where the incentives come into play. So the landlords know they can't charge above this price, but what they will do is they will know that the tenants, the people renting, they want to pay. They would be happy to pay more. So they let them. What they do is they'll charge, say, a key fee. So what that means is the rent is only, say, $1,000 a month. But if you want to rent the place, you got to buy the key, and the key costs $5,000. So it's a way of getting around it. It is illegal now as well. But you can imagine all sorts of things would go on to get around that maximum price because two people just want to make a deal. We also get a thing called non-price rationing. In a market, price usually rations the good. So the equilibrium price clears the market. There is no shortage, there's no surplus. Here, the government has intervened and the price cannot do that. The price mechanism cannot work. So there's a shortage and the owners, the landlords, they have to work out a way to ration that good. Who gets the scarce apartments for rent, right? There's not that many around. Who gets them? So what tends to happen, unfortunately, is things like discrimination. They ration based on not on price, but on other aspects. So they might just rent them to friends and family. It might be a bit of nepotism. It could be that they discriminate. It could be that they say discriminate on racial or gender or sexuality or on how many children you've got. They'll discriminate And what that means is that sometimes the most vulnerable people are the ones who get left out. So it actually works at cross purposes with the original intent. The price ceiling is to help those who are vulnerable get into a home. But what it can do is almost the opposite, make it harder. Okay, we'll look at another example. So that's the rental accommodation market. In Venezuela, they've also done them on food markets. So on essential items, they've said there's a maximum price. So this sign here says there's no bread. Because there are going to be shortages, right? We know that shortages are going to happen. There's not going to be enough bread because why make it if you can't make it and make sufficient profit at that low price? You're just not going to make it. Why would you? You're not out there making a loss. So what we get is inefficient resource allocation. We're putting resources towards the wrong things. The market is trying to say, hey, we want more bread, things like bread, and the government's not letting it happen with the price ceiling. So inefficient resource allocation. And we're also going to get lower quality goods because they're going to try to make it as cheaply as they can so they can still make profit at that low price. So we get low quality bread. Look, it looks sad. And the big form of non-price rationing that we get here are queues. So this is a queue in Venezuela to get bread. There's just not enough around, so people just line up. First in, first served, right? Not a good situation. Okay, we got to look at all of our stakeholders. So first we're going to look at consumers. So consumer surplus, that's the best way to analyze how consumers fare from this. So we'll put in the price ceiling on the right there, and then we get this consumer surplus. So consumers can be better off. They can be. Those who get the good. But of course, look, there are people who miss out. Those who get the good for the lower price, they're better off than they were before. But some people don't get it at all, so they're worse off. But here's what happens to consumer surplus. We need to be able to draw that. Producer surplus. Let's see what happens to them. This one's pretty straightforward. Price ceiling. Suddenly, they only make this small little producer surplus. So they're trying to make their bread. They're capped at a price. So suddenly the difference between what they're willing and able to sell for and the price that they sell for is a lot less. So that hurts them in that way. And while I'm thinking of it, workers as well. So workers are going to be put out by this as well, right? Because if producers are making less money, they're not producing as much. Therefore, they don't need the workers, do they? So workers are going to be worse off in this situation too. Okay, and allocative efficiency. Let's have a look at this. So we've got our consumer surplus, producer surplus over here on the left with no government intervention. It's maximized, allocatively efficient. Here, we don't get allocative efficiency. So the social surplus, right, consumer plus producer surplus, is less now. So what's this? This is dead weight loss. So it's a bit of an explanation behind that. Remember, we've got supply equals marginal cost, demand equals marginal benefit. A dead weight or welfare loss is the benefit from producing one more loaf of bread is better than the cost. So society should be doing it. They should be getting these extra benefits for society, but the intervention is stopping them from doing that. Okay, and lastly, the government. Now, the government's not paying anything. They're not collecting any revenue here, but it still matters. So this is the president of Venezuela. So what can happen is there can be problems. It can cause social unrest. So here there is a large protest. Here, this is all the police in riot gear. This person saying there's no food. That's why they're protesting. We want food and there is no food. So that goes against the government's popularity. Of course, it doesn't matter if you control the elections, but in general, the governments are not going to be too popular from these things sometimes. Some people love the low prices. Some people see the harmful effects of the low prices. So there can be mixed effects for the government. All right, that's all we need to know about price ceilings. Thank you.